Are you serious? Here's a portion of the interview I had with Mike from around the world on the CERN. As today, the CERN is going to turn. Will it burn? And some scientists like Stephen Hawking is saying, don't do it. This is too dangerous to crank it to 99.9% of the speed of light. Let's see. Is this Mike from around the world?
Pastor Begley, how you doing today?
All right. It's great to hear from you. How you doing, Mike?
Well, I'm doing well.
Okay.
Doing better than those guys at CERN.
Yeah. What in the world is going on for the guys at CERN? What do you think about this, Mike?
Well, actually, I think they should really stop while they're behind. But, CERN is ramped up right now.
Is it?
Are you aware of that?
No, I was not.
Yeah, it's at about 6.5 or higher tera electron volts. So it's really cranked up. That's at about probably speed? Near 50%.
Yeah, about half speed right now. So tomorrow, Mike, is it true? It's my understanding that tomorrow they're going to try to go all the way, 99.9% of the speed of light.
Yeah, they are. One thing that many people are watching for is, one, will containment still work? Can they contain the forces inside the tubes? Because in a worst-case scenario, what they're going to do is, well, there could be plenty of worst-case scenarios, but it just is not a good idea. However, they're going to go ahead and do it anyway.
When you say contain the forces, can we stop for a moment and talk about what forces are we talking about here?
Well, they're essentially containing something equated to a nuclear explosion. That's what they're doing. So if they can't, if their equipment fails at the point of the collision, because they have multiple collisions in there, if something fails, those positive protons are going to shoot all over the place. They will breach the facility.
In other words, 300 feet under the ground is not enough, is what I'm hearing you say.
No. Not with that much power. And, I think that Stephen Hawking and some of the other scientists are actually worried about the material imbalance it could cause. The only way to equate that, well, people have the idea of a black hole, but it would essentially be this. What they're doing is colliding particles, and they are recreating the Big Bang, which produces more particles. Well, they already understand that these particles are coming from somewhere. They're not actually created, as they once thought, but once you begin to break down the fabric of the forces that hold matter together, you essentially begin to disturb where it came from. And what could happen is a negative effect. In other words, instead of creating particles, they could in fact cause particles to go into nothingness or go to another dimension we can't see. By the way, if they create too many particles, well then, all that material is going to have to come from somewhere. And this reality keeps itself in a balance very well. God has everything balanced. Everything has a balance. And if they disturb this balance, it will attempt to rebalance itself. Because, it's just like the human body is automated, right? Nobody can control their liver, lungs, heartbeat, and all this other. It's automated. Well, the Lord also made the earth as a functioning, automated life sphere. So if they damage the life sphere and it begins to correct itself, it's gonna cost them. But they're also dealing with exotic particles and energies that are not they're not well understood. That's why I think they shouldn't do it, because you can't experiment on that level and then say, wow, we didn't know that would happen, but it cost the lives of many people.
Do you think
do
you think the people that live in Geneva, Switzerland, are in danger possibly tomorrow?
Well, with any experiment of that, CERN is the most complicated largest machine on the planet. Besides their other facility, there is another facility, CERN facility, but it is essentially it's a very dynamic piece of equipment with you're dealing with enormous forces. If something were to go wrong, they could essentially create a brand new type of nuclear explosion, so to speak. That wouldn't be good. But the real danger, Pastor Paul, is not an explosion, it's an implosion. If you can wrap your mind around an implosion, that's the problem.
In other words, it's not an explosion, it's the creating of a black hole, an implosion.
Right, which would essentially begin to cause particles to disappear, to be uncreated, if you will, but they would be zapped into another place, balancing everything out. If that were to happen, the weight of the Earth would change. Now that could sound impossible, but it's a very real concern. If the weight of the Earth changes, well then, at that instant, the Earth could literally be thrown out of its orbit because inertia and other powers wouldn't work the same with Earth. Its weight in ratio to the moon would actually begin to disrupt things, which means it would be everything would go haywire on Earth.
Mike, is it sort of like, the Tower of Babel, they built, they were in the process of building a tower into heaven, into another dimension is what I believe, because God said he saw that man had come up with the ability, had understood the technology, how to build into, or how to climb into the heavens, so he had to confound his language to stop him. This is the opposite effect, though, isn't it? It's as if we're trying to crawl into the depths of hell, open a portal into the abyss of the darkness. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here. Great implosions, tremendous new weaponry, sword that could be used. There's all kinds of things that might come out of this, but and the fear of a great implosion. But so it's like it's the opposite way of going into another dimension. Am I right?
Well, I think of the nuclear explosion was once thought impossible a very long time ago, until they did have a nuclear reaction, which caused an explosion. Well, implosion is probably insane to most people until they perform this operation, which would cause matter to disappear. An explosion adds matter to other matter so fast that the particles begin to react, things get incinerated, and so forth and so on. An implosion would take matter from this world and send it somewhere else, or turn it into nothingness, because everything has a balance. This is what to my knowledge, Pastor Paul, they've already achieved part of an implosion. But containment was an improbability, and what actually could vanish was one of the floating factors they couldn't quite get. If that were the case, any hole into nothingness would essentially be a gate that anything could come through. I mean, we live in this realm of reality, not the other realm where all the other exotic things take place in the spiritual realm. So they could essentially do this. I do not believe it would destroy the earth. It's not going to destroy the earth, but it could cause a type of spiritual imbalance that everybody would feel.
And okay, and I've heard you talk about, before I go into the demonic side of it, let me go into a physical side of it. Is it possible that even now that people's joint pain, arthritic pain, pressure, migraines, pressure on their head, pressures, could people be starting to experience some of that because of the CERN activity? Even today's running at half speed, but tomorrow. So is there some physical manifestations that we may feel?
I'd say yes, there is a physical effect, and actually they began to actually test the energy levels last night, which was, well, not last night, but yesterday, which can cause a person irritation. Now, you have to remember, too, Pastor Paul, the human brain, the neurons how a person thinks, how they function in their body, is controlled by their nervous system, essentially the brain. Well, if our magnetosphere, or the magnetic field around the Earth, is disturbed, so will everybody's thoughts. So then a person can easily be irritated. They can easily go off the edge into their thoughts. They can easily slip into deep depression. They can easily begin to give up and throw caution to the wind. They'll begin to act violent. And every time they do one of these tests, you see some type of a riot or something of that nature. Now, that would be happenstance if it happened, every once in a while, but not every time they do it.
Yeah.
So then every time they do this, it really does affect the magnetic field, which in turn affects the thoughts of people and spiritual entities, because we're essentially living portals ourselves. Spiritual entities, because they're legalists, they need that invite. So if a person is depressed, they no longer care about a host of things. They'll throw caution to the wind and begin to act by their impulse.
All right, so it's sort of... So we'll come back with... let me do part 2 of this interview, because we're going to get into the spiritual side of this and demonic activity, as well as the potentials for pole shifts. Could there be can the CERN disrupt the balance of the Earth magnetic field enough to create a pole shift, and a whole lot more? Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview with Mike from around the world, as today, August 12th, CERN will be cranked up to 99.9% of the speed of light and colliding of protons in this mighty machine 300 feet below the surface of the Earth, called the CERN. Are you saved? Give your life to Jesus Christ. We're running out of time.